halfway point of the 2023 season, and the Gators have a massive game on Saturday. But before we get to that, we wanted to share our thoughts on how the first half of the season has gone by grading the Gators. Florida is 4-2, and while there's been a ton of doom and gloom, they've managed to only be a game and a half off of the Vegas win total projection for the season, which was only 5.5 wins. The team certainly hasn't been perfect by any means, but dare I say they've either met or maybe even slightly exceeded expectations this year so far. They've won every game that they were a favorite in, and they won one game that they were an underdog in. And then they lost twice as an underdog. So all that said, let's go ahead and jump right into the grades. All right, Graham Merz at quarterback. I'm going to go ahead and give this a B+. Merz has struggled to hit targets downfield, and he usually holds the ball for a bit too long, which he himself has admitted to in post-game press conferences. But his 80% completion rate and his 9 touchdowns to only 2 interceptions honestly is better than anybody predicted it would be this season. All summer, we heard about how Napier didn't get anybody good out of the transfer portal at the cornerback position, and they should have gone after other people, and there were better guys on the board, and yada, yada, yada. We heard that Graham Merz wasn't going to be good because he wasn't good at Wisconsin. And truly, Graham Merz has been serviceable, if not better than serviceable, through this halfway point of the season. So, a B+, and I feel like that's a stronger grade than most people expected out of our quarterback when we were talking about him over the summer. Let's move to running back. I'm going to give this running back group a B-. When the Florida running game is good, y'all, it is really good. But that was in games like Tennessee and Vanderbilt. But then there's been other games this season where really, truly, they've struggled to get the running game going. And in the 2 games that we lost, we averaged under 2.1 yards per carry. It's simply not good enough. Now, a lot of that has to do with the offensive line position as well, which we'll grade and get to in a minute. But this running back room is too talented for it to only impact games some of the time. So B-, and I would really love to see more of an impact from our running game the rest of the season. Let's move over to wide receivers. I'm going to say B. The wide receivers have not looked terribly flashy this season so far, and some of that honestly is just due to offensive scheme. But they've largely done what we've asked them to do this season. So it's hard to grade them too harshly. If they're able to get Trey Wilson more involved in the offense, I could see that this room could get a higher grade by the end of the season. So, we'll pay attention for that. The more Trey Wilson touches the ball, the better it is for the Gators offensively. The Gators have been better in the games that he has played in, so hopefully that will continue and he'll stay healthy through the rest of the season. Now let's move over to the tight end room, which I'm going to give a B-. The tight ends have not been particularly productive this season, and they've struggled in both the passing game and honestly in run blocking as well. That was at least until Arliss Boardingham's breakout game against Vanderbilt. He definitely improved the grade of this position group last game. And if he keeps it up, this grade could get even better. I feel like we've just been waiting for a tight end to kind of break through and show us that they have what it takes to really be like the guy. And I think Boardingham did that against Vanderbilt. So I'm interested to see if that continues against South Carolina. And if it does, I'll have an even higher grade for this room by the end of the season. All right, the last position group on offense, offensive line. This is a hard one, guys. I'm going to give him a C-. Not all of the blame for the inconsistent run game can go at the running back's feet. Talked about that when we talked about the running backs and their grade. The offensive line has been very inconsistent, and part of that is due to injuries. They mauled Tennessee, though, and then they struggled against Charlotte the very next week. So it is a little bit of an enigma for me. It's hard to fully figure out what's going on. Injuries do play a role. The offensive line was not nearly as deep as we thought it would be when we talked about them over the summer, but this is a young group for the most part, and I do think they could improve, but they've just been too inconsistent to get a higher grade than a C- yet so far. Before we get to the defense, do me a favor, comment below what you think about the grades on the offensive side of the ball. And if we missed anything over there, what would you grade the offense? Let's move on into defense. Let's start with the defensive line. This is a unit that has performed pretty well all year, but we've talked about it on this channel so many times. They just can't get consistent pressure on the quarterback. And honestly, their inexcusably bad game against Kentucky kind of brings this position group's grade down as a whole. I'm going to give them a B-. I think they have the potential to be really good, if not great. We just haven't seen it yet. I need to see more pressure on the quarterback. I need to see more hurries. I need to see a mean streak, and I need to see them move a little bit faster. We talk about finding that next gear. They really haven't been able to do that consistently yet this year, but this, again, another young group that I do see improving as the season goes on. This group, I would say, is maybe one of the surprises for me on defense this year. Linebacker, I'm going to give them a B+. Shamar James and Scooby Williams have been fantastic so far this season. James could be in the running for an all SEC honors at the end of the season. He's been really good. Scooby has come into his own. Every time he is on the field, the defense is better. And honestly, this group's grade would have been an A, but once again, poor performance against Kentucky kind of brings the group as a whole down just a little bit. But still feel like they've performed a lot better than we were thinking they were going to at the beginning of the year. So B+, and as the season progresses, there's definitely room for this to finish at an A. Okay, let's talk next about the cornerback position. I'm going to say B-. Jason Marshall has been kind of disappointing this season. We expected him to be lights out, but it really doesn't seem like he's separated himself from the other quarterbacks, and we thought that he would by this point. The room as a whole has not been bad, but in year 2 under Corey Raymond, just kind of hasn't lived up to the hype that it had coming into the season. I just think I expected a little bit more. So B- for the cornerbacks. Next up is safeties, which I'm going to go with a B. Jordan Castell has been a great surprise this season. He is going to be pushing for freshman All-SEC, or honestly, maybe even freshman All-American honors if he keeps up his current level of play. And outside of Castell, the safety room kind of struggled to find consistency. Bryce Thornton, though, is somebody that I think has done well in games. He's hopefully getting his first start against Vanderbilt. And I think that's a sign of exciting things to come, right? This is, again, another really young position where there's a lot of promise. There's just a lot of inconsistency. So another room that could end up with a higher grade by the end of the season. All right, y'all, we'll get into my very favorite unit, special teams. We're going to start with the punting. Honestly, Crush has been good. I'm going to give him a B+. He did have a couple shanked punts, particularly in the beginning of the season. I think he's found his groove at this point, though. He's been very good. He's averaging 48.9 yards per punt, which is outstanding. And, a stat that's equally important to distance is that 1/3 of his punts are landing inside the 20. That's another really important marker of a strong punter. So I would say Crush has had a really good season, and again, could finish the year great. I would have given him an A outside of those couple shanked punts at the beginning of the season. All right, let's talk a little bit about kickers. All right, when Mahalik was the kicker, the grade was a solid F. He was completely inconsistent. We never knew if we were going to make field goals or we going to make extra points. Is there going to be a block? It was a mess. Smack, however, has not missed a field goal yet. He's 6 for 6 on the season. So I'm giving him an A. Now that he is the starter, A for this position group. So what would I give special teams, everybody else but the punter and the kicker? I'm going to give them a big fat F. Outside of kicking and punting, the special teams unit has been abysmal. However, there is a silver lining. This is almost entirely due to penalties. which is a fixable issue. Lots of them procedural. So this is a unit that I really honestly think could benefit from more practice, right? More discipline, more on the field reps. A lot of young guys play special teams, which I think is important, but you always want to make sure your starters are out there too. I love when we see starters on special teams. It means coaches take it seriously. I would love to know how often it's practiced during the week at Florida. I think whatever the number is, it's not enough. And this has cost Florida points directly. But I also think it's moving in the right direction. It's just not moving as quickly as I would like it to. It's a problem that can be cleaned up, though. You minimize penalties, this group grade goes through the roof. All right, so maybe the most important group we are going to talk about, coaching. I'm going to give this coaching staff as a whole a C-. They've had consistently poor road performances, not just this season, but last season as well. They're about to go on the road against South Carolina this upcoming Saturday. So, maybe this jinx goes away. Maybe this changes, but Florida didn't play well on the road against Utah. They need to play well on the road against South Carolina. They didn't play well against Kentucky. This is just not something this coaching staff has proven to be good at so far. Hoping that changes, but it hasn't yet. The horrible special teams and procedural penalties, I also feel like fall back on this coaching staff. When it happens consistently, it's not execution so much as coaching, right? And with special teams, is it being practiced enough? Is it being practiced the right way? I don't know the answers to that, but it's consistently a unit that has really struggled, and we haven't seen tons of improvement on that. So that makes me think it's a coaching problem. I also think we have a questionable offensive scheme. And until Napier proves to us that he can make adjustments and fix the offensive issues, this grade isn't going to increase. But the hope is that each and every week Napier is going back to the drawing board, that we will see some of these tweaks. And, some of them may not happen until the offseason. But I do think that there is the ability for these offensive tweaks to continue to happen week in and week out, and this offense to get better. They're never going to be great this season, but they could be good. But a lot of that falls on coaching. So C-, but I'm hoping that grade will continue to improve as the season goes on. Now the road from here, though, gets a lot tougher for UF. There are no more easy games left on the schedule. If you don't show up each and every week, you will lose from here on out. What Napier and company do on the back half of the schedule is what they're going to be judged on. The first test is Saturday on the road, and UF hasn't been good on the road. If they can win, it's going to set the tone for the rest of the season, and some of these grades then could increase. If they lose, it's going to be tough sledding, and we're going to have to take it one day at a time. There are no easy games left on Florida's schedule. They need to figure out a win on Saturday. We appreciate you all for the support. Make sure you join us live tomorrow night as we preview the game at South Carolina. Go Gators!